I don't have a prepared talk on the same subject. I speak many places and it comes out differently. And I really enjoy the Q&A, which is unique and different each time and very spontaneous. And we'll have a nice Q&A, I hope, afterwards. I'll make some opening remarks and then we'll have the Q&A. I just want to give you a kind of positioning of this topic of Hindu contributions. And I want to make it relevant for people to be Hindu today. So it is not something that we do because our ancestors did it, our parents did it, because it's chauvinistic, we can say we have something of our own. Those may be important reasons for some, but I'm convinced that it's a very important system and body of knowledge for humanity at large. And it's not about being Indian, but it has a wide range of theories, ideas, practices which have value today. So I'll give you a little snapshot of that. But to give you some of the headlines, and I write a lot on these, so I can just tell you a little bit now. Hinduism has had huge amounts of contributions to what we now call mind sciences, cognitive sciences, neurosciences, which has just been discovered in the last 30, 40 years. It's become a rave to talk of mindfulness meditation or the effects of yoga or something like that on various things about the body, and experiences of higher states of consciousness that people are now able to start measuring and evaluating, things that the rishis and yogis have claimed for a very, very long time. So this particular area is very cutting edge. It's very, very much where the new Nobel Prizes are going to come. And yet it involves areas where our tradition has unparalleled expertise. And in fact, it's a bit of a shame that much of this research is being done in the West, even though the practitioners are in India, but the research on these is being done in the West, and the writing of papers and getting credits and filing for patents and discoveries and naming things a lot of it is being done in the West. It's kind of a shame. It's not that people who are from the practicing side are not allowed to, they're just not doing it, which is tragic. Now, if you look at the nature of discovery in our tradition, it follows a lot of parallels with science. Because when you look at in science, what does science consist of? It is not a set of truths or a set of outcomes, but a set of methods. Science is a set of methods. You follow certain methods and then you get the outcome. So it's not that this science means E equals mc squared, it means this, that. Those are the outcomes. But the methodology is that it has to be empirically based, so you should be able to verify it. Yeah? It should be reproducible. So if somebody has done an experiment, then others should be able to replicate it. It should be independently verifiable. So people who have no vested interest should be able to verify it, and so on. Similar approaches have been carried out by ancient rishis in a different kind of empiricism, which is the inner empiricism, which is creating a silence, which is like a clean room laboratory would be, creating a silence, and in that silence which is an inner laboratory, doing experiments with where do this thought come from, observing, making inner observations, and being able to come up with insights which ordinarily our minds are not able to comprehend, or our minds are not able to cognize these kind of insights. So rishis have had some phenomenal insights without the benefit of external instrumentation. So the West certainly has pioneered and done very well in what we call instrumentation of the external kind. And Indians have done very well in a kind of an internal instrumentation also, that could be thought of as an instrumentation, the mind being an instrument which can be developed, can be cleaned and turned into a system of observation. Now, the reason we are sure that the rishis had something going is because there are mantras which give you the velocity of light, and there is no instrument known in any of our texts that somebody used, and the velocity of light comes out pretty accurate. It's not as accurate as today's instruments will tell you, but pretty accurate. In fact, at a time when people in most of the world did not even think that light had a finite velocity, most people thought that it's infinite velocity, it's instantaneous. So even the idea that there's a finite velocity and here is a formula how you calculate it, and the formula is 98% or so accurate, is absolutely phenomenal. And then things like, you know, calculating the value of pi to several places pretty accurately. You go on and you find a number of observations which are validated, but these observations came out through a kind of an inner intuition in a state of consciousness which others replicated, because it's rishis replicated what other rishis had discovered. So there is this kind of a peer review equivalent, that somebody says that a certain meditation or a certain practice gets you some experience, then others can be taught that. It is not that you have to be a specially chosen prophet from God, none of them were, but it's a human potential that every human has. So somebody can discover it and others can learn, and they can also try it. So this idea of an empirical approach, although this being an inner empiricism, we call it Adhyatma Vidya, and being able to replicate it, being able to demonstrate it with independent people, is very similar to some of the qualities of science. Now, one of the misconceptions which Hinduism has suffered is that it is very otherworldly, it is superstitious, it is not practical about this world. But you know, if you look at the archaeological evidence, people in ancient India were quite advanced in many technologies. You look at civil engineering, you look at architecture, metallurgy, you look at medicine, farming, water harvesting, ships, on and on, cotton, you know, so many things. And you find that the evidence from early centuries, very early centuries, is very strong. Up to the British period where the British are remarking that Indians make superior steel. Ancient Indian steel called wood steel was exported to Greece, Roman Empire, to make swords and things like that, because it was far better than anything they could make. So I'm talking about practical things. This is not just some otherworldly, philosophical, mystical discovery, but these are very practical things that people were doing very well. The first metal to be distilled was zinc in India, in Rajasthan. It's archaeologically accepted by the world community. In fact, some European society of metallurgists or whatever put a big thing out there in that location that this is the first place where zinc was distilled. Now, the distillation of zinc is a breakthrough, because when you melt and when you heat a metal and it becomes liquid, then it becomes vapor, it evaporates, all the impurities are left behind, it evaporates, and then in another place you freeze it back, becomes solid again, you get the pure metal, 100%. All the impurities didn't evaporate, so they're left behind. So when you can make pure metals, then you can make alloys of arbitrary combinations. You see, so India had leading export technology in this sort of thing. And if you look at the archaeological sites and look at the evidence, there was a thriving economy of these. This would be like today's modern technology. It would be a big breakthrough in material science for that time. And this is also this type of prosperity of the external world. And I want to emphasize that Hindu society was not at the expense of neglecting the external world, which is a very, very big misunderstanding, we are told. That Hindus need to be saved by others because they don't know how to look after themselves, they're not progressive, they're frozen in time, they are, they don't have the idea of progress, of rationality. Well, how did they do all these things I'm talking about, you see? You also notice economic prosperity. The European historians of the history of economics, including now the latest encyclopedias on the history of world economics, will tell you that till the 1850s, India and China had about 2/3 of the world GDP. India had like 25%, China had 30%, something like that. And what's now called the West was less than 20%, including Europe, US, and so on. And this only, it took about 100 years, I think from 1750s to 1850, that is when the decline came, and there was an industrial revolution in England, a whole lot of transfer. India from being an export country became an importing country. England from being an import-oriented country became an export-oriented country. That 90-year, 100-year period is when things shifted. But until that, for thousands of years, India and China were very advanced in economy. And this is written and documented by lots of traders and lots of ancient historians. And the reason I often, when I give talks in schools in this country, I often say, well, where does India fit in American history? And I'm surprised that hardly any history teacher, all these, once I was made chair of the Asian Studies in the state of New York by the governor. And so he had his sister, that particular governor, his sister was a teacher, educator. So she brought all these leading educators to discussion on this. And I said, I first want to ask you, when you're teaching, why do you want to teach India, and how would you teach India in the context of American history? Not one of them started by saying, you know, that's what Columbus was looking for. Not one of them thought of that. It was not positioned that way in their head. So then I had to tell them that the Queen of Spain was like a venture capitalist looking for a big intellectual property breakthrough, which would be worth a lot. And that was a sea route to India. And because the sea route would bypass the land hassles of the land route. And the reason the land route was a hassle is because the Ottoman Empire, which was Muslims, the Ottoman Empire, controlled Central Asia, Eastern Europe. So the land route, which was traditionally called the Silk Route, from China and India on one side and Europe on the other side, blocked by the Ottoman Empire. So either they would not let things through, or they would charge 20 times the price. They would decide as a strategic advantage they had access to the Indian and Chinese goods. Europeans did not. It was a huge problem because Europe needed these things. And there was no sea route at that time. There was no Suez Canal. There was no around Africa, none of that. So the Columbus journey was a venture capital journey to find a sea route to India. And that is how this whole thing started. So you see, if you look at, and then Vasco da Gama took the route around Africa. One of them wanted to take the route across the Pacific, across the Atlantic, and the other one around Africa. So going east and west respectively, hoping to find India, and didn't know that American continent is in the middle, and the rest we all know what happened. So you see, India has been a very important part of world history as a positive economy, as a source of knowledge, as a source of technology, as a source of all kinds of things. The Middle East had huge amount of Indian workers. Today they are workers of different level, but you know, you will see university professors, mathematicians, astronomers, medicine people, doctors, all kinds of people in the medieval era in the Middle Eastern countries coming from India, being acknowledged as such. And a lot of the Indian knowledge translated into Arabic and Persian became part of the Middle East knowledge system, and then centuries later would be translated into European languages like trigonometry, geometry, algebra, a lot of these things which Europeans feel they got from the Arabs, and therefore they misclassify it as Arab numerals and so on. Okay, what they don't know is that the Arabs themselves got it from India, which the Arabs acknowledged. Al-Jabr was an author whose book starts off by saying that this is being translated from Malayali. And that book by Al-Jabr, when it later gets translated into Latin and so on, that knowledge becomes known as algebra. So this India is a source of knowledge for the West, for the Middle East, and all over Asia. I mean, the people who never try to hide Indian contributions, you will find them in China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia today. It's very interesting. When my foundation used to do these world conferences, once we got a delegation, I think 15 years ago, we got a delegation from China on Vedanta philosophy, Hindu philosophy, ancient mathematics, Vedic science, all these kind of things. There were like quite a lot of them. And I thought that maybe they must be dissidents, or they must be people that have run away from China, and maybe these things are not allowed. So I spent a lot of time getting to know them, and they told me it's just the opposite. The Chinese government is encouraging all this because they think it's part of their history, and they want to bring in all this knowledge from all the sources. And there's a large amount of study of Indology in China, which is very respectful of the Indian sources, not like some of the Indology in this country. So in Southeast Asia, you go to Southeast Asia, you'll find a huge respect for Hindu and Buddhist origins of so much knowledge. And we think of Buddhists having taken Buddhism to all over Asia, East Asia. But when the monks were going, they were taking samples of food and agriculture, they were taking music, they were taking linguistics, they were taking mathematics, astronomy. It was a huge amount of knowledge export. So places like Nalanda, which is a Buddhist university, would be like today's, Duke University, Harvard University, Princeton University. They were like Ivy Leagues. And if you look at the history of Nalanda, it's written by foreign students. There are volumes written by students in Mongolia, students in Cambodia who had gone, and students in China who had gone there and studied and brought back, great accounts of what the curriculum is and what is being taught. So from that you can reconstruct what was going on in Nalanda. It was attracting the cream of the brightest students from these countries. And the Queen of Cambodia was quite a regional power at one time. The Queen of Cambodia had endowed a whole college, built a college within Nalanda University for the sole purpose so her brightest students could be sent, live there, bring the knowledge back. So like today, people from around the world would go to some Ivy League in the US and bring the knowledge back to India. That used to be the way it was in India, where people from other countries used to come. So you have to understand that there is this inner journey, Adhyatma Vidya, mystical, trying to do some knowledge gathering inside, using these meditation techniques and other techniques, and you cannot say that this is otherworldly, mystical, world negating. These are unfortunate labels that have been given to Hinduism, and we've accepted them. Whenever I'm told that Hindus are mystical, they're otherworldly, they're world negating, I tell them that look, chances are 1 in 10 doctors in your town may be an Indian. Now he's not world negating. You don't want a world negating guy doing surgery on you. People who are in Google, people who are in NASA, they're not some world negating bunch of guys. So then the answer is, yeah, but they learned all this from the West. It wasn't like that. And this is so sad. Our people are colonized. So Narayan Murthy, when asked once why Indians so smart, and he said, oh, British, we're very grateful British came and taught us math and English. And so, we don't even know our own history. So it's so ridiculous, So the history of science is not well known, of Indian science. And this is why my foundation started a 20-volume project many years ago. We finished 9 volumes on the history of Indian science and technology. And we focused on hard evidence-based technologies like steel, zinc, copper production, metallurgy, cities, making construction material, water highways, these sort of things, shipping, and so on. And so to remove this, to combat this stigma that one of the things wrong with this Hindu tradition is that it leads to social deprivation, and you don't care about healing people, and you are worrying about, because they come up with some kind of a Hindu argument to show that it's a useless thing, that you are trapped in some cycle of karmic fatalism, and that's why you abuse your women, that's why there's poor people, we have to send some missionaries to rescue you. And so if people become Hindus, then they're going to be abusive. This sort of a very negative, almost like an anti-social portrayal has been frozen about us, whereas if you look at all the facts of the science and technology contributions are not deniable, and they are not, you cannot argue against physical evidence. So we decided that the first 20 volumes will be only based on physical evidence, not text evidence. So a text may say somebody had a spacecraft, but we don't believe it because I haven't seen one. I haven't seen one. It says there was some weapon of mass destruction, so it must be a nuke, but I haven't seen a crater with radioactivity. So I don't believe that. I'm a hard scientist. I don't believe in all that unless I can see evidence today. But I can see a steel pillar. We can do research on it and find out that there's a layer of phosphorus which is exceedingly few microns, and that prevented it from rusting for a very long time. We can see evidences of all sorts of technological things which we can bring into a laboratory and we can evaluate them. So if we can construct the history of science and technology starting with only physically verifiable evidence, that meets the criteria of rigor. So based on that, we are constructing, it will take a very long time, an accurate picture of Hindu contributions. These people were Hindus. Another interesting thing that you find out is that this is not Brahmin related, nothing to do with the elite text kind of people. The example I gave you of zinc distillation, those would be people by today's standard considered low caste. They were the ones doing all this. A lot of so you see which jati, or, how they moved up or down also had to do with the economy of a particular trade, which may go up at some point in time and go down at some point in time. And it's not like frozen in some kind of a historical canon or religious canon. That was not the case. So completely one has to just start at scratch trying to understand our history. The history of Hinduism is a highly misrepresented history at this point in time. So if you look at what the modern society has benefited, you'll find things like linguistics. Until the 1800s, it was a requirement in Europe. Every European university had a major department of Sanskrit. Starting in the year 1800, in Germany, France, England, they were all starting departments of Sanskrit. And to get a doctorate in linguistics, you had to study Panini. You had to study Sanskrit and Panini. That was sort of the gold standard of knowing grammar. And then you could study in other. You can look at the history of linguistics. You can ask people the history of linguistics and the 19th century role of what was the relationship between linguists and Sanskrit. You'll see that there. And it took 100 years of digesting Panini into a kind of meta linguistics, meta grammar, where the Sanskrit could be kind of forgotten. But now it's revived again because of computational linguistics. To translate natural languages, if you want to speak in language X and have it translated immediately into Y, automated, which will become a killer app, or it will become one of those apps where every telecom network will have it, every one of these smartphones and tablets, everyone will have, you can enter any language, get any language out, it's getting there. The cutting edge of that field is called computational linguistics, and the cutting edge of that is Panini's grammar as the engine. So you go from language X using Panini's grammar, you reformulate it into, you represent it that way, and then you output it in language Y. And the sad thing is that not only, there are two things, not only is the credit to Panini's language being faded and erased, it's being called computational linguistics, and the Sanskrit is being turned into a different code, that's the alphabet. But worse than that, whatever doesn't fit certain pronunciations, certain ways, certain things you extenuate, certain things you emphasize in the way you pronounce, which are extremely important to the mantric effect in our tradition, are being removed, are being erased, because today people don't understand the value. So whatever they use, they are taking it and calling it something else with a new terminology, and whatever they can't find useful is being erased and forgotten. And I call that digestion. Like, prey is eaten, and what is useful becomes part of the predator's body, and whatever is not useful is rejected and thrown, and the prey disappears. So that's how Sanskrit, first it got digested into linguistics, European linguistics, Western linguistics, and now there's another revival of the study of Sanskrit from the point of, by computer science people, from the point of view of computational linguistics. So in 10 or 20 years you may not need Sanskrit at all, because whatever was considered useful is now in computational linguistics, and you don't need to know Sanskrit, Pandits are out, all this kind of stuff is gone. That's what we are headed for. So the influences of Hindu knowledge and thought on the rest of the world are, because they go through this digestion, therefore we forget where these things came from, because these are mapped and because they are decontextualized from the Hindu source and recontextualized as Judeo-Christianity, Western Enlightenment, Western science, some new kind of a jargon, new kind of terminology. Because that happens, therefore future generations don't even know where it came from. So a friend of mine, an Indian doctor, 10 years ago comes back very excited from one of these medical things where they have learned mindfulness meditation to cure some things in his field, and I told him this is Vipassana, and he was very angry because you mean what his grandfather was teaching, you mean he's come to United States, he's gone to Harvard, gotten a degree and went all the way somewhere and paid a lot of money and learned mindfulness, got certified, and now he's certified to cure people using a certain thing. And this Rajiv Malhotra tells him the same thing, that some regular stuff that his grandfather used to do. He's very insulted, very insulted. And I had to argue with this guy that this is mindfulness meditation. John Kabat-Zinn learnt it from Goenka, and in the early days used to credit him, and learnt it from other people also, many sources. And then he started the Mindfulness Institute. Then he started gradually the acknowledgement became a footnote, then it became an endnote, then it disappeared. Then he started saying he's gone ahead of it, and so on. I gave many examples of this. So the history of the Indian origin of an idea gets erased, and when it's discovered and by the Westerner reformulated, that person is named the pioneer, the discoverer, and the history begins with him. And that's why you are told that America was discovered in 1492. So when I go to this museum in New York, the Natural History Museum, and then I used to go with the school where my kids went, and they used to always say, this is in America, discovered it. So I used to say, you think the people who lived in America for 10,000 years had not discovered it. But then there is a history of this idea of discovery. There is a doctrine of Christian discovery. You should search. Just search doctrine of Christian discovery. And you will find that in the 1400s and 1500s, the Vatican was asked, who owns all these lands that we are discovering? We say we have discovered on behalf of the church, because church claimed to own God's property. Church was God's franchise. So God had created the franchise, so everything belongs, and so they're going around claiming this franchise. And so when a person discovered, they would discover it on behalf of the church, and so the question was, who owns it and what not. So there were a lot of papal bulls, a lot of popes. Papal bull was like a decree, like you would say fatwa. It was Vatican fatwas, papal bull, that's what they were, absolute decrees. And in these decrees it clarified that discovery, when a Christian sent by the Christian church stakes claim, that is a moment of discovery. In other words, discovery happens when we find something. Yeah? Until then it's not really discovery. So that is the doctrine of Christian discovery. And some federal cases were fought in the United States with Native Americans, claiming that, look, this belongs to us, And this doctrine of Christian discovery was used in these arguments, cited. You search doctrine of Christian discovery, you will find thousands of pages of case history in the United States also on citing this sort of proof of discovery because of this papal bull that said that discovery is when Christians discover it. So now in the Enlightenment era, Christian discovery is replaced by, when your patent lawyer files the case, files a patent. It's called discovery. So this notion of ownership and who has discovered it is now this neuroscience is sort of the discovery of mindfulness meditation, and all the other traditional things that go with it. So I think that if you want to really understand Hindu contributions, you have to reclaim some of these things back. You cannot it's not a level playing field, it's not an honest and fair discussion. If credit has been taken, stolen you might say, and mischaracterized in terms of how the discoveries have happened, and you cannot take that as the set of facts and then try to see how Hinduism stacks up or what its worth is and where its values are going forward. So now, and I can go on, there's this, the worst part is that these things have become fashionable in India also. Every time I go there, they have this like Howard Gardner teaching, multiple intelligences. So Tata's, all these guys are listening, and Infosys corporate headquarters call this Harvard guru to teach about multiple intelligences, which basically says there are many kinds of intelligences inside a person. It's not just a linear scale. There are many kinds of intelligences. But as I point out, Sri Aurobindo wrote very extensively on planes and parts of being, that the being has many planes and many parts in these planes. And his theory of education was that you have to educate all the planes and parts of being. So you don't have it's not one, the child or a grown-up is not just sort of one kind of intelligence, there's many, many planes and parts of this. And when you're educating, you have to educate all these. Whole theory of education that Sri Aurobindo wanted came from that mode. Some of the people in the West were inspired in India, like Maria Montessori during the World War lived in India, met Sri Aurobindo, met a lot of these people, and she developed some of these ideas. She brought them here. And then the Waldorf schools started by Rudolf Steiner. He was a theosophist. He'd gone there, brought these sort of ideas. There is something called accelerated learning. If you look up accelerated learning, they teach languages fast, they teach mathematics fast, they teach things very fast. And you look up many schools, many places are teaching accelerated learning. Your kids can go there and learn something fast. And if you look at the history of the pioneers in the West, they credit a man called Lozanov. Lozanov, he must be in his 90s if he's alive, for being the granddaddy of a new system of, he's a neuroscientist, a new system of learning where you can learn faster. And that's where the history starts, as if he came up with everything. But then you look at Lozanov's own book, his first book, is his experiences in India, where he was sent during the Soviet era, during the Cold War era. He was sent to see if yogis have extraordinary powers, because what we call siddhis. CIA was also doing this kind of research. The CIA thought that maybe we learn how to have distance vision. We can look at the spy missiles or missiles of the other side, or maybe yogis can do some things which have defense applications and so on. So CIA was doing some experiments, and so were the Soviets. So the Soviets sent these kind of people like Lozanov, who would go and become like an anthropologist or become some kind of a wandering guy going around, picking up information. And he came back and he said that there is one extraordinary thing he learned that yogis have, that they have huge memories. They can recite 10,000 verses. Some of them know even 100,000. They have huge memories, And as a neuroscientist, he couldn't figure out how it's possible to have so much memory. And so he wanted to go back and understand how they can memorize such an enormous amount of stuff and keep it in their heads. And he came up with this thesis that one of the reasons they are able to memorize is because they have a certain rhythm, intonation to their chant. It's like when you were kids, if you go to village schools in India, maybe they've stopped doing it, they sing the tables. They say 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8. They're singing with a certain rhythm. They're singing like it's a song. Now, I was in one of these westernized schools, and we didn't know why are they doing all this. So I would go to this village school of my grandparents, and I would tell, what are they learning? This, and they'd say, well, this is our tradition. This is how we learn. Now, this Lozanov says that when you have this musical quality in knowledge, you are encoding it in the left brain and the right brain simultaneously, because the musical quality goes in the right brain. That was his model, and the analytical knowledge itself goes in the left brain. And since you have a dual brain experience, a dual brain learning, there is some kind of a correlation, some kind of a mapping in both brains, and so recall is easier. That was his theory. So he said that we should introduce multimedia, and that the Indians learn a lot through theater, touching. They are experiential in knowledge. They are not sitting and getting knowledge cerebrally. They are doing it through their senses. They'll dance and get an idea. They'll dance an idea, and that idea becomes part of them. So he was very impressed by this kind of Gurukul system of knowledge. So he came and he started, and this became part of accelerated learning. So in University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth, where we have a Center for Indic Studies, and I'm involved in that, we started a project to bring this Vedic learning system back to the United States and call it Vedic system. So we have a project called SALT, Super Accelerated Learning Technique, and there we show this is a Vedic system. There is one Pandit from Trinidad or Guyana, from the Caribbean countries, who is he's a robotics engineer also. So he is introducing this learning system into the schools, and he's able to show that he can take random kids, including dropouts, not people at a very high percentile, just average people, and the 12 years required to go through the Massachusetts school system, he can do it in 7 years with ordinary people. So this means it's a breakthrough in learning, because a lot of this way you can learn faster. So I'm giving you an idea of a Hindu system. You can bring it back. So we need to bring such things back into India also, because India also lost its education system and started producing British clerks for the British administrative service. Yeah, so, this system of learning in the villages, in the traditional areas, gone and replaced by what is considered to be educated people. Yeah, so also oral tradition is going fast, because unless you are able to read, write in the modern Western sense, you are not educated. So the criteria of who's educated has to do with literacy today. And you may be otherwise, an oral person may be very educated. So a traditional sitar player, or tabla player, or a Kathak dancer does not need to have written. He needs to internalize the knowledge on his body. He has to have a huge, profound amount of knowledge in his body. A singer. But these would be classified, these traditional professions would be classified as illiterate people, uneducated people. You see? So we are also doing a lot of harm and violence of our own, because we've taken in a whole epistemology of a colonized mindset. Now I can just go on, but I want to one or two examples more, and then I'll stop. One of the things we just discovered is that this is a very interesting one for scientists. We were told that nanotechnology is more of mostly physics, because you are making nanoparticles, atom or molecule at a time, kind of a physics process. But some people started looking at Ayurvedic concoctions, which are called bhasma. Bhasma is a kind of a chemical process. Some herbal plants, and you process in a certain way, and that's the bhasma, and then that becomes a treatment medicine for something. So people are looking at how it's possible that bhasma made of gold or containing gold as one of the ingredients has an effect which is beneficial, antioxidant and stuff like that. We don't think that gold is something that you ought to have. Even certain metals, heavy metals which would be considered toxic, but as bhasma, they're having beneficial effect. So what they're finding is that the bhasma produces nanoparticles. They are so small that at that size, the absorption behavior is very different than when the material is in larger particles. So there's a huge nanochemistry going on. There are papers on bhasma that US government has funded, a lot of research in the US is funded to see can some of these processes produce nanochemistry which has usefulness today, and some of these things are of use. So it is not only for correcting the history of our tradition, it is not only for setting the record straight and getting rid of all these taboos and misconceptions. It's also for the interest of humanity's future, being able to take these ideas forward, that we ought to do this kind of research. So I would like to just sort of stop and take questions and continue the conversation in an interactive way. Thank you very much for listening.
First of all, thank you very much, Rajiv ji, for such an insightful talk. I really enjoyed it. I have a very burning question in my mind. I hear this word Hindutva quite often in Indian context, especially in terms of Indian politics. I see that it's one of the most abused words in Indian politics right now, which was coined by V.D. Savarkar some years back. So I was wondering that what do you think is meant by Hindutva and how is it relevant in context of India right now?
See, I don't use it, but I understand how others use it. For me, the word Hindu is fine. Hindu tattva. Tattva is essence. So you could say Hindu-ness. So Hindu-ness is Hindutva, as it literally means. As far as I'm concerned, Hindu is fine for me. Being a Hindu is fine for me. Once a word is coined, then it tends to be associated with in a positive way or negative way with whoever coined it, whoever uses it. So then it is considered like his ideology, his ism, he started one. And especially if the word Hindu is already there, but a new word is coined, variation of it is coined, and then it also can be seen as, is this for a particular political group? So does it mean I have to vote for that group in order to be a good Hindu now? It's like if you were to say singerness for singing, okay, and you formed this group called singerness group. Now I don't join your group, doesn't mean I can't sing. You see, a word can be an adjective which describes, like good Hindu, Hindu-ness. Suppose you take a word, an adjective like good. So I make a company called Good, and I have many products from like Walmart. I have all the products. It's called Good. So then whenever somebody says your product is bad, I'll say no, it's good. So the confusion is good as a proper noun or good as an adjective. Correct? I'm entitled to using word good for my company. Right? While I'm entitled to saying this is good product because it is in the proper noun sense, I'm giving the impression that it is a good product in the adjective sense. Correct? So same way, I can brand Hindutva, and we can be bunch of non-Hindus but we'll say no, we've got this brand, we are Hindutva. The idea is, does the meaning of the word, does the organization live up to the meaning of the word, Or is it that by owning the word, you assume that you already are Hindu? You are the standard of Hinduness because you've got that meaning. It's like I got the word, I trademarked the word good products. So I am the one who got the good products. How can you have good products? I have that. You see. So to me, the issue is that I am very clear on this. I am all spending my whole life, everything I got for dharma. To me, it's not the property of a particular party or a particular individual. I want good Hindus in every party. I don't mind if leftist Hindu, rightist Hindu is a good Hindu, is a good Hindu. I would like to have good dharmic people all over society, everywhere. And so, if a particular organization calls itself something else, but they are good Hindus, I will be happy. If they are calling themselves Hindutva and they are good Hindus, I am very happy. But if either of them is not good Hindu, I am not supporting them. So, the name is not my criteria. So, I feel that there is nothing wrong if somebody has a name Good Products, but I would recommend to you that you have to go beneath the name and check it out. Don't let the name automatically mean that the products must be good because they call it that way. You see? So, that's how I feel about this. But it's a name in circulation. But I think that lately people are happy saying Hindu. I've seen that, like for instance, right now in the political election, people are saying Hindu. Quite fine, and there's no reason not to.
Janardhan, I'm from India, obviously. What other background?
Whatever you want. Are you in this university?
I am a veterinary pathologist.
Okay.
I work as
Good.
a scientist.
Okay, good.
In your opinion, what each of us can do to prevent what you mentioned, we being erased from history and history starting at a new point? So what each of us can do? This
is the concern 24/7 I worry about. The biggest threat is not so much attack, but being digested. And people have not understood this digestion. That is why these books I have are trying to explain it, over and over again. So when you are being digested, see, the predator is praising you. He is saying, you are so delicious, smells good, this is good dinner. That's what the predator is saying. He is not criticizing. Nobody is angry and upset at the food he is going to eat. You obviously wouldn't eat it unless you found it nice. So the fact that you are being praised, it doesn't mean that it's good for you, because it could also be the capacity of we want to appropriate you, digest you, finish you off. So that's it looks like a very positive thing happening. When people are taking Hindu ideas and replacing the Hindu with some Christian yoga or some neuroscience idea or some computational linguistics or whatever, all these things are going on. So many, I'm writing a lot on how Hinduism is being digested into things where the Hinduism is being erased, and then what is left behind we are told is no good, Hinduism is no good, whatever was good has been taken away and digested. Our people have not understood it. Our people are very happy promoting somebody who comes and praises them, and they do not understand that this is not in the capacity of helping us as Hindus, but basically extracting things out of it, you see. So this is like a discussion I was having earlier today also. A lot of people we are supporting, our communities are supporting, seem nice on the surface. They are diplomatic, they are polite, they will say the right things, they will say praise you, and you are so starved for compliments that you are willing to do anything just because they praised you. So this digestion is a very dangerous thing that is happening. Now my antidote to digestion I have explained in this book called Indra's Net. In Being Different, I have explained the danger of digestion, and in Indra's Net I have explained a concept called poison pill and a concept called porcupine defense, which is to look for something non-digestible which is inside that entity. So, there is something inside this entity that will protect us, that will protect this whole entity, because that one part of it they can't accept, they cannot digest, it can destroy them. So, because one part of it can destroy them and this part is not removable, this gives them a headache. And I have explained it in a few examples how the critical part, a necessary part for something to get digested, is they remove certain parts of it, they compromise certain parts of it, they remove this, they remove that, then they can digest it. So, for example, somebody called Stephen Batchelor in England, one of the most pro-Buddhism scholars for most of his life, very well known, very highly regarded, has started now removing things from Buddhism which will not fit the Western paradigm. Reincarnation, karma, he says not part of Buddhism. Okay. Because as long as these are part of Buddhism, they serve as a poison pill, since you cannot Christianize a system which has got these in it, because it's contraindicated for Christianity. So, he has to remove these in order to make it Christian compliant. You see what I am saying? So, this is an example. Now, he was giving a talk in India International Center in Delhi a couple of years ago, room full of people there, everybody is so excited that this man, he knows Buddhism, and everybody thinking he's like another big shot, big teacher of ours, and nobody had picked up that his Buddhism has this subtle shift, which you won't even catch unless you ask him, and you won't even think of asking him unless you've read his books, because in front of you he's not going to say these things. So, I have studied it, I have understood what he's done, how he's digesting. So, I was the only person in the audience who said, why have you excluded karma and reincarnation from Buddhism? And he didn't want to say that this is how I'll make it part of Christianity. Of course, he didn't want to say that. So, he tried to give me this argument that this was later added by Brahmins, but Buddha never said it. This is what he tried to say. So, I knew this answer. So, I gave him all the evidence showing that Buddha, right from his original teaching, Buddha in fact described his own earlier lives. Buddha described his own earlier lives. So, the burden is on us to be sufficiently knowledgeable to argue. Now, this put him on the defensive, and I even told him, I said that could it be that this is not some kind of a discovery, the motive is not some kind of a discovery of the real history and all that, but the motive is that you want to make it Christian compliant, yeah, and you want to make it Western science compliant, because as long as certain Buddhist philosophies require reincarnation and karma as part of the cosmology, part of the nature of being, yeah, as long as that is the case, you are having difficulty appropriating it. To appropriate it, you got to get rid of something which is a problem for you. So you see, every thing we have to look deep and find some ingredients which the other side wants to get rid of, which we should not allow them to get rid of, because it will, to most Hindus I come across, they think it's a useless fight I'm having, why bother, it's so much little detail. But this is so important, because when you get rid of that thing, it is not just a technical issue, now it is digestible, and it is no longer Hindu, nothing to do with Hindu, it's a common thing, it's a very common thing. You follow what I'm saying? So I'm making one of the books I'm writing is on what is non-digestibly Hindu. So, if you want to protect against digestion, and if you knew these are the 10 things that are so non-digestible, sabse pehle you got to teach these things, you got to build a foundation on these things. Every guru, whatever his philosophy, whatever he is teaching, must introduce these 10 as ingredients that you cannot leave out. That Hindu cannot get digested, because he is rooted in something, he is anchored in those solid things. But general, be good guy, avoid bad things and go pay your taxes, rotate your tires, run your antivirus, these kind of normal goody things. Everybody can do. What's this? Everybody can do these things. So Hinduism become watered down, generic goody stuff. That is the problem. And the reason our gurus have done that is partly they do not understand this battle, this Kurukshetra, where we're being digested. They don't have enough knowledge of the other side to be able to argue. They are compromised because they're looking for funding and patronage and support from the very people who are digesting. I went to this immensely great guru. I went for 1 month deep tantra meditation where they put you into a state of death, near death. You go through what is called death meditation. You actually simulate dying, different parts of the body, and you're conscious, but your body, you stop breathing even. It's a huge experience, and when you come out of it, and this goes on, you first do it for 1 minute, then you longer. When you've done this 1 month course, you're so completely different. Now, some of the most enthusiastic participants were Westerners, and this guru told me they're my best students. They got their recorders and they got this, they got that. But what he didn't know is all the conversation during the lunch time was, I'm going to teach this course, I'm going to make it part of my workshop, I'm going to write that book, I'm going to invent this term, I've come up with this new thing, I've got this new lab, I'm going to invent, So they've already got their commercial minds working, okay? So this kind of corporatization, commercialization, commodification, of Hinduism has been facilitated by our gurus because they get more money from these people. They are good followers because they have a certain agenda. They have a certain motive. They're there. That is the research lab. So the thousands and thousands of years of R&D that the rishis did, gurus are happy to package it and sell it. And so as a political fight, we can't win. Hindu American Foundation is trying it like that. They were young guys who used to attend my seminars, these Hindu American Foundation in the 90s, Mihir, Megani, these guys. And they learned these issues and started an organization. But they did not go deep enough into the philosophy, so they turned it into a political fight. As a political fight, how can you stop somebody from practicing yoga? How can you? You can't. How can you stop them from practicing mindfulness meditation or any of these things? You can't do that. So rather than a political fight, you have to fight on authenticity. You have to say that if you remove a certain ingredient to make it Christian compliant, then actually you've done a distortion. It has nothing to do with politics. It's not that you can't do it, but you have to do it correctly. So that's it's a little more demanding, it's intellectually more demanding, but the only way to survive is that we have to discover the digestion going on. We have to come up with resistance to the digestion. We have to discover the U-turns going on. We have to reclaim all that knowledge back as ours and create a new generation of leaders who can stand up and argue.
The first question is, we often hearing the debates these days in India and about and as someone has already pointed out, the Hindutva. So they are often referring as a judgment of Supreme Court of India that Hindutva is a Jivan Paddhati, not a religion or something like that. So I would like to understand what exactly we mean by Hindu. If I'm saying I'm a proudly Hindu, the moment I say I'm a proud Hindu, I am having a tag of communal, being a communal or something like that. So that's the first question. The second question is, when we discuss Hinduism with other religion, friends of other religions, the first question they ask me about the caste system, and it's almost impossible to justify those how you can justify the caste system. I agree on that in ancient days we were having the caste based on the birth, based on the profession, not by the birth. But I would like to understand it from you.
Okay, so both these questions are very good. First is Hinduism a way of life? I have made fun of this Hinduism equals way of life in this Indra's net. There's actually a section called Is Hinduism a way of life? So you just read that. But basically I've said that a way of life, it doesn't tell you anything because dogs have a dog way of life and cats have a cat way of life and Bin Laden had a Bin Laden way of life, Ravan had a Ravan way of life. There is no life which doesn't have a way of life. I mean, you can't say that there is life which has no way of life. Every life has some way of life, So to say Hinduism is a way of life, unless you tell me what specific way of life, it doesn't define anything. It is as vague as saying that a car is a collection of molecules. Well, obviously it's a collection of molecules, but so is a banana and so is a chair. So it doesn't tell you what's distinct about a car, what kind of collection of molecules makes it a car as opposed to a bicycle, So what way of life it makes it Hindu? So anytime somebody says Hinduism is a way of life, you tell him, okay, then the next question is what kind of way of life makes it a Hindu as opposed to non-Hindu? So he hasn't really answered anything by saying it's a way of life. He's just, the question continues unanswered, right? So it's a really useless answer because it doesn't do anything, right? So I'm trying in here I've defined the word astika in this book, astika. Not somebody who believes in Vedas, but a much broader definition. And I've defined what I call open architecture. I've defined the term open architecture in this book, Indra's Net. So I'm introducing a new vocabulary to bring in Hinduism as an open architecture where a lot of things fit. But open architecture also needs to be protected. Open architecture doesn't mean that anything goes. Viruses are not allowed in the internet. You have to get rid of with virus scan and all that, right? So similarly, this open architecture has to protect itself from things which are dangerous, which are trying to undermine the openness. Otherwise, it won't remain open. So I have given this whole definition description in a very careful way to give maximum flexibility for many different kinds of people to be Hindus many different ways, and yet exclude clearly those who are hostile to it. This is a very detailed definition I am doing. I am probably going to do some workshops also on this. The second question is on caste system. Now, I feel that caste as it has become today, which is birth based and exclusive and all that, is a bad idea. It is not a useful idea. But I do not link it as a problem from the Hindu scriptures or Hindu texts or Hindu system, because we don't have that word at all. There is no word caste in Sanskrit. It's a Portuguese word called casta. Portuguese came and they came up with this word. We have a word jati, which means community, and we have a word varna, which means your aptitude, your personal disposition, what your talents are. So this idea that there are different varnas, different kinds of aptitudes and different kinds of skills that people do is a beautiful idea, but it has nothing to do with your birth. You see, in the West, one of the things that Westerners are very proud of is separation of church and state. They wouldn't say it's a bad thing. Church corresponds to Brahmin and state corresponds to Kshatriya, because Kshatriya is the head of the state and Brahmin is the equivalent. We don't have church concept. But separation of Kshatriya and Brahmin is a very old concept, that Kshatriya will not become Brahmin, Brahmin will not become Kshatriya. The one who rules, who has power, is not the one who's got the authority of the Brahmin for rituals and for those certain kinds of functions, because combining them would give too much power. Our separation of these forms of capital goes even further, because neither of these two could hold economic assets. So Vaishya, who's like the corporate guy, Wall Street, people with wealth, are neither political power nor intellectual power. So what you can say is that the intellectual property, R&D, knowledge, teaching, knowledge workers, that should not mix with political power because it will be abusive, and neither of those two should become corporatized into money making. So these three camps are three different forms of capital. They should stay separate. I think it's an economic principle which is very meritorious. Now, the problem comes when you take these forms of capital and you start determining based on inheritance. That's the problem. Now, in this country, wealth is inherited. So Vaishya is by birth, because Bill Gates' kid will be different than your and my kids. large part of the wealth is self-made, but large part of the wealth is also inherited. The inheritance laws allow that. Political power is not. Political power, although Al Gore is multi-generational, Kennedys are multi-generational, Bushes are multi-generational politicians, you can have examples, but it is not institutionally restricted that way. It is easier for people to take up their parents' position because they have network, contacts and all that stuff, right? Similarly, intellectual also, you'll find a lot of people are, many generations of professor and so on somewhere. So, by birth, a continuity of the profession of the family by birth also happens here, but it is not as much as in the case of India. So, the problem is also mobility. You see, if you don't have public schools, then you are going to learn what your father studies. Your father is a tabla player, you learn from the age of 2 to help him out and you learn the beats, and your father is a tailor, then you learn how tailoring is done, because there is no public school where you are going to learn these things. In the same village, if there is a public school and the kids are going to a public school, then then they will move into whatever their aptitude is. It's as simple as that. You do not have to have quota in the jobs, you have to have mandatory education. This quota in the jobs is a quick fix of a lack of universal education. If you give everybody universal education, K through 12 like in this country, required by law, everybody will get, and not just a symbolic education but mandatory, quality, real genuinely educated people, then the marketplace will pick the best. Who would not hire the best worker? I don't think corporate India worries about caste when they are hiring people. I don't think corporate India worries. So, if you want to look at mobility, mobility comes from, first of all, have free competition, intensely competitive business climate, where they have to compete on merit, therefore they must get the best talent from wherever they can get. Yeah, and they cannot hire that this guy's father worked here, will hire him. They can't, because then they will not be competitive. And then second, give everybody education through the end of high school. So give everybody the talent that they are capable of. Yeah. So if people are coming from all the different village families into a school, public school system, a good quality school system, and then the graduates of that are hired based on their merit, then there is no caste left. In one generation you can finish it off. You do not need to politicize it. You do not need to have vote banks based on it, because then you are making a permanent problem out of it. And you are fragmenting the politics by creating vote bank politics, and you are setting the country for breakup by having one group against the other group, by telling them that your enemy is that other group, you see. So what you have to do is good universal education, and then comparative markets, so that people have to do it on merit. That's the solution.
Like, I hear a lot of this thing in discourse today that Hinduism has been Semitized. So there's a Semitization of Hinduism, and we are becoming intolerant of other people's thought, or thoughts of, like, within our same community we are becoming intolerant of thoughts which don't suit our own views, and we become violent and we start banning books and we start protesting and these court cases. And especially, like, recently you have been part of that discourse where one book was not actually banned but was being withdrawn because it had some views on Hinduism. And I don't agree with that book, but again, I don't think banning is a good idea. And what are your thoughts on Semitization of Hinduism?
There's several. First, I have to disentangle several questions. Semitization is a separate issue. We don't like something, we can just say we don't like it. We don't have to, because Semitized religions are the Judeo-Christian. So, is Hinduism being Semitized? I mean, that's a whole separate conversation. I would say Hinduism is being Semitized, nothing to do with picking up bad habits and becoming intolerant. Hinduism is being Semitized because we are losing our distinctiveness. We don't understand what it means, and we are defining ourselves in terms of Western. When we define Hinduism in terms of Judeo-Christian categories, that is Semitization. So when we translate Atman as soul, that is Semitization. Because soul does not have reincarnation, doesn't have no rebirth, no prana janam or next janam, soul. Soul, animals don't have, Atman to even plants have. So when our Guru has replaced the word Atman in the book and called it soul, that to me is Semitization. So the problem of Semitization is not what the rest of your question deals with. You see what I'm saying? So don't mix your problems. So problem of Semitization is a problem of translating the Sanskrit non-translatables. I have a whole chapter in being different called Sanskrit non-translatables. Means do not translate these because there is no equivalent word. If you translate these, then the equivalent word that you are using is actually a distortion and you have Semitized it. Okay, so Semitization to me is the translation of non-translatables. So that's a separate topic, nothing to do with tolerant, intolerant. Okay. Now the second issue is, should we respect difference and different points of view and those who disagree with us? Of course we should, and that is not an issue. That is not my problem with anybody. I have in the book Invading the Sacred documented dozens of times I have approached these other people to argue and debate with me. Even in this discussion today, I wanted Laurie Patton to come and be the discussant because she's the chair of religion or something like that here. She won't come because she has differences with me. She won't come. I'm here. So it is not that we don't like difference. I've had discussions with Mark Tully, discussion on TV, you can watch, with Frank Clooney from Harvard. I've had very nice amicable disagreements and discussions and point counterpoint with many Westerners. Why is it that Wendy Doniger for 20 years will not come and discuss with me anywhere? I've said, you tell me where. Television, Google, live, I'll come. No.
I supported you on that.
Okay, wait a second. Nobody want to come. So firstly, it's not that, don't mix it up with I'm being intolerant. No.
I'm not saying
No, wait a second. No, wait a second. I'm just making my point. I'm just explaining I'm separating all the issues into different categories, first of all. First of all, to set the record straight, I thrive on debate. I would love tonight to have been a debate. It is that the other side don't show up. Now the other side don't show up because they have a privileged forum of prestige, okay, but they don't have the same level of knowledge to argue back with me. On our knowledge, on argumentation, on debate, I can hold my own and do very well with them, okay, in a live audience like this. They know that. I have hundreds of hours of YouTube. None of my views are secret. It's open. I'm the most public I got everything I have to say, I say it openly. It's not like different things in different places. They know so much about me, therefore they're not able to come and just deal with me. So if anybody is forestalling free speech, open discussion, it is those guys. It is not me. Yeah. So my dispute has never been that a book is bad and it should be banned. My dispute has been, I have a problem with the book, you should give my counter book. I'm writing my own response in a book. I don't write a 2-page blog, I write a 400-page book. So on Wendy Doniger, I wrote a book called Invading the Sacred and got many authors and many editors to contribute, and it has been out since 2007. But why didn't the same airport shops which are selling her books sell mine? Why didn't the same publisher also accept mine? Why is it that when I wrote to these publishers and said, it will be very good to sell both books simultaneously, put her book and my rebuttal side by side, they did not take it. Why? Because there are political reasons they wouldn't take it. Why is it that on Sulekha.com, which was the first portal I used to write, I used to write on Sulekha.com. When I wrote articles on Sulekha.com, they used to rate the blogger. I was rated #1 blogger of all Sulekha for many years. When this controversy started with Wendy Doniger, her people could write an article in Washington Post. Front page, I was named front page Washington, I'm a famous guy. I got people from all over the world calling me, saying, you are on front page Washington Post. I said, oh wow. Front Washington Post would not take even one letter to the editor from me or anyone else and post it, whether not in the print and not in the online. Okay. And New York Times, another one of her students wrote an article. So I'm talking about abuse of power. It is a form of dictatorship. It's a form of control through, like we say, Brahmins control the discourse in India. Well, these are the people controlling the discourse in the world, in the English language. You can call them Brahmins, Pseudo-Brahmins, whatever you want to call it. But they have a privileged control of the discourse, and they will not let others in. So the question to ask somebody like Laurie Patton is not whether you agree or disagree. Do you agree with Rajiv's right to free speech? Do you agree that when Rajiv comes, you should come and have a chat for the sake of open discussion for why aren't you here when you have known for 2 months that he's coming? Why is she out of the country right now? Because she didn't want to be here. You should ask her that question. Okay, I'm telling you that. So I have a list of a large number of people I critique. I'm so open. In Indra's net, I have another 30, 40 people who are part of this neo-Hinduism camp. They think that Hinduism was invented by Vivekananda and didn't really exist. Things like that they are saying. I am naming them, quoting their arguments, giving my response. There is no insult, there is no threat, there is nothing abusive. It is just good, clear, logical scholarship based on hard facts. Some of their translations are wrong, some of their citations are wrong, some of their reasoning and philosophy is wrong. I'm pointing out exactly like a technical person or a technical person would find bugs in a system, or a scientific mind would find that the evidence wasn't right. This is exactly how I'm doing it. And this is what the academic and intellectual people are supposed to be doing. So they are supposed to be the kind of person I am, but they are not. They're hypocrites. The problem really is there is an asymmetry of power. The publishing houses, the ideology of the publishing houses supports a particular point of view. The ideology of mainstream media in India, the Hindu, Times of India, all these NDTV, they support a particular point of view. Yeah. So Sulekha, when I was writing things, and when these other people they had access to Washington Post, New York Times, NPR, all kind of places, C-SPAN, all these places they would come and give their thing, and here I am writing a little blog here, a little blog there to give my answer. It is disgraceful that a guy like me spent 20 years to get my point out, running around addressing groups. And these people can sit in the comfort of some nice Ivy League prestigious place, don't have to do much running around because they got a lot of cronies running around and popularizing their view. And they have a lot to lose facing me directly because they know that they will have a lot to lose. So it's like, the person who's the incumbent in power wants to ignore the challenger. So the burden is on me to be non-ignorable. I have to raise the stakes so much, and I have to make my critique so sharp that they can't afford to ignore me. So now I put them in a quandary. If we don't respond to this guy, he keeps getting stronger, he keeps getting more followers, he keeps getting more courageous, he keeps digging up more stuff on us and publishing it, correct? And if we respond to him, actually we are playing into his game, because then he becomes even stronger. So they don't know what to do. Do we ignore this guy or do we attack him back? They don't know what to do. And I wish they would attack me. I really wish they would attack me. So you see, this business of banning the book is not my style. I never wanted a book banned. I never asked for a book to be banned. All I want is the equal right my book should be given. Now in the United States, when there's a presidential election and this and that, the rules are media gives equal rights, equal coverage. And the sitting president, when he makes a State of the Union address, the opposing side gets time to give a response. Media gives them time. Yeah? India, they don't do that. And even in the United States, what is applicable among the Westerners to each other is not applicable when a Hindu wants to get equal time. If I say, I'm not asking you to be out, but I'm asking that I should get equal time to say about my own tradition in response to what you said about my tradition. I don't get that time. Try and see if in Duke you can get that time. You will fail, or UNC you will fail. So the real issue here is a control of the distribution channels. It's like, if Walmart and Target control so much % of the retail shelf space for certain products, and they say we will boycott your product, you're finished. You can just set up a small shop in the side and sell a little bit. We will carry his product, whether it's the best or not, we'll carry his product. Now that's an issue, and that's an antitrust, anti-monopoly issue. If it happens in commerce, that there is a monopolistic privilege being given to a certain ideology, and the opposing ideology is not being given equal play, if it were a commercial, business, corporate arena, then I could file a case on anti-monopoly against these guys. That's the case I would file. I wouldn't file banning them. I would file that they're trying to monopolize and deny me the equal access. But in this particular academic arena, there is no monopoly law. You can have a monopoly. That's the law. So, I want you to understand how to frame the question. Okay. Now, the people who asked for banning, I did not support that, because I felt that better demand to the publisher would have been, here is our 300 or 400 page response, we want you to publish this also. That should have been the response. Equal right. That should have been our response. But that you can't do if you're lazy. You have to work hard. You have to produce that. You have to produce such a good one that it will withstand all the ammunition and all the attacks which will come. Right? I do that. These guys didn't do that. Because the easy way out was we just raise some halla and yell and scream and bring it down. I never done that. Okay?
Hello sir, good evening. My name is Manmohan and I'm a banking professional from Charlotte. My keen interest is in mapping Hindu beliefs, cultures, traditions with modern day world logic. So I had a few concerns with respect to the discussion we had this evening. I would like to stick to just the topic of Hindu contribution to modern day world. I fully agree with your views, and to add to that, I read a few anecdotes pertaining to Ayurveda, Indian medicine being imported to Saudi Arabia, the Khalifa being treated by Indian physicians, Indian metallurgy. You mentioned about the zinc thing, and in addition to that, that thing is the Mehroli iron pillar, which has never. And apart from
What's
that,
your question? Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
My question is that we all know of our glorious history, our traditions, and the world is recognizing it. But there was a time gap of say some 100 years. We didn't recognize who we are. We were pretty ignorant. The world didn't recognize who Indians are, who Indian beliefs are. So the question is, were we so ignorant to our legacy, or the world was too cruel or too jealous to recognize us for this duration? Why all of a sudden we are waking up one fine day and saying we are the best and we can do wonders?
Well, firstly, we are not waking up. I don't think that there was a 100-year period which is over. I don't think that's the case. I think the kind of thing I'm doing is a very, very tiny minority of people. I don't think most of Indians have woken up. They may have some chauvinistic, bombastic thing, we are great and all that, but if you ask them substance, ask them facts, read the books of history of India in India itself, you will find that they don't teach history of Indian science as part of Indian history. They don't teach history of Indian philosophy. They don't teach history of Indian medicine in medical schools. They don't teach history of Indian technology in IITs. They do not teach all this in the India itself. So I don't think that this 100-year period of colonization is over. We are getting more colonized. In fact, I have an e-group where we discuss all these things. Indians are getting more colonized, more enamored by Western ways, Western aesthetics, not only loss of language, but also ideology. Who are the best sellers in our media, all Western stamped people. Academic scholars in India getting trained in the West come back and teach. It's that sort of thing. So even the debates that I'm having on Hinduism, we are not in the winning side in terms of numbers. We are on the winning side in terms of merit of the argument. But what is selling? One book of mine sells, 1,000 of theirs sell. Mine sells in some, you have to go to flipkart.com and buy it, and theirs you go to the airport and you buy it. It's sitting right there. There's a huge difference in you go to NDTV. This debate, that Wendy Doneger thing that broke out in the last 2 months, not a single Indian media brought me on the panel. Not a single Indian media. I wrote to so many of them. I can come by Skype. I was even present in India at that time. I was there for 40 days. Okay. No response to all the emails. You see. And I'm the only person who started the whole controversy 10, 15 years ago when I wrote about Wendy Doneger. I'm the only person who wrote a book in response to that. They should have at least said as a courtesy that this guy has worked so hard. He's the person who instigated this whole thing which has turned into this controversy. Let's hear what he has to say. Not one. Even the publisher who published Invading the Sacred, which was my book in response to Wendy Doneger, has gone to the other side and started publishing her books. And my earlier book, which was a bestseller, the father, Rajendra Mehra, was the owner of Rupa. His son now owns it. So there's a change in, he's more on the other wavelength. He was a solid guy on my wavelength ideologically. So he was so happy with my book that it became a bestseller in India for 2-3 years. Sun comes, book is out of print. The publisher who made a bestseller out of it is refusing to republish it and make money in the light of this controversy. He would make a lot of money on this. Why? Because the phone rings, somebody from somewhere calls, somebody from University of Chicago or somebody from somewhere calls and says, you know, don't promote this guy's books, we got all these new books coming, we'll give to you. So business talks. So I didn't complete the story on Sulekha. What happened and why I stopped writing on Sulekha is because they were told by some of the advertisers. The advertisers are all these like New York Life, Citibank, American Express, all these kind of people who put these big ads, you know, on the Indian blogs. So some people there, some Indians lobbied that the way this publisher, this blogger, this Sulekha will listen, his name is Satya Prabhakar, he was the owner. The way he'll listen and throw this guy Rajiv out is if the advertisers call and threaten. So he then, what he started doing is, every time I would write a blog, before my blog would be for the opposing view click, and he would give somebody this. Before, normally it is after. Normally you listen to somebody and then you give the opposing view. But here, to preempt them from reading my view, before you read my view, first you read what's wrong with it. This is what he started doing. Our own guy. So our people are sold out. Media sold out. Publishers sold out. Government people sold out. Education ministry, what books they're selecting sold out. So I don't see this that it was true for 100 years, sir, we are now back. We are not back. We're getting worse.
So he actually asked the question that I very much believe in, that there was a Mughal period and then there was 100, 150 years, we missed out on the Industrial Revolution, and then we became, like you said, loss of confidence, or then we never picked up. And like you said, I do believe that we have not come out of it. There are some ways, the NDTV, even IBN, or all these news channels that are, the way they pose questions, they are not impartial. If you really pay more attention, you will come to know it. But at that particular point of time, you may not realize that, yeah, this was a good question. So do you see any optimism that it's going to be a gradual, there needs to be some kind of a counter, other than promoting Hinduism, that needs to bring it common playing field?
Yeah. So I would have preferred if things hadn't gone so bad, and I would have preferred a level playing field where all the faiths and traditions in the true spirit of Hinduism would coexist and be given respect. But I think the anti-Hindu and the subverting the dharma forces have become so intense and so strong and so organized and so powerful, so hungry, so greedy and so vicious. They all Hindu names only. So many, this Ramachandra Guha, then there is this one, all these kind of guys, they all paraded right and left, they are the icons, they go to this literary festival and they're given this award, and they get, they get an award, like that, So I don't know what's going to happen to India, because this knowledge feeds media, then the whole portrayal of movies is like a certain way, the portrayal through TV shows. So this mass thing which is spreading, it has really polluted the English language world in India, and the English language world is spreading, more English language jobs. For matrimonial, they want to be English speaking. In Punjab, they're shutting down Punjabi schools and starting English schools. My mom's driver, 10 years ago when I used to go back, I used to say, bring a little gift for his children. They would all come, I would sit and say namaste, they would say namaste, we would sit and eat together. Now when I say namaste, he tells his daughter, Saab ko good morning bolo. And my mother was saying that she runs a school for all the kids in the back, she runs a school there. She's 89, she runs these things. So she says there's now a demand from all these jhuggi-jhopdi people, driver servants, that get rid of all these teachers and English sikhao. and they want the girl should be wearing the frock, boy should be wearing a tie. They want their kids to grow up like Saab. So India is becoming like that. It's becoming more like that. You see, so you will find.
Sitting here, I feel that maybe I am getting more interested, or maybe I have more time to get into these details. Like recently, I got real therapist Avrana, and in that they mentioned that like when that book, the judgment had a basis of it is not the content, but it's more the intention and the facts. They were not related.
Yeah. So anyway, what we do is, our people are not putting their money where their mouth is. I have worked way too hard for very little support, and people come and they show emotional support and they all, but they, who then in the end actually comes through with it. I have very small % of the people who are vocal and supportive, who will actually make the sacrifice, make the investment, try and help me out in a concrete way that can benefit this kind of a cause. So I am a barometer, because I do, for 20 years I have given every year between 100 and 150 events of this kind. I was in India, I had 45 events. In Washington I went in 4 days, I had 7 events. Here I have 2 events in 2 days. The next week I am going to Cornell, then I have 2 events in Princeton, then here, everywhere. Every year I am doing minimum 100 events up to 150 events every year for 20 years. I don't know anybody who has this record of so much interaction, involvement about this topic, this issue. Temples, universities I go to, corporate people I go to, civic groups I go to, political groups I go to, you name it, I go. So I have a great database of what is the thinking like. Here and India both I do. A little bit of Canada. And I don't know anybody who's got this much database of what is the mindset. And I see that lot of josh, but not substance behind it. Lot of josh, lot of what I call mouse clicking activism. Click, 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 mouse, usko bhej diya, forward, tweet, email, sir, do this, sir. Like that. So I say, you do it, then gone. That sort of thing. All wanting self-importance, everybody form a group, become officer, vice president, trustee, put their name in the letterhead, put on the blog side, home page, Hindu leader, that kind of a thing, just showing off. But where is the substance? I don't see that. I'm sorry to say, but if I were a Muslim or a Christian, I'd have no funding problem, I'd have no problem, there would be audiences 100 times bigger everywhere. Yeah. The average campus, New Jersey at least I've been to, when there's a Muslim event, it's a huge scale event. Every year they have an annual Muslim conference in Washington DC, to make the point. They have a Washington DC, very prestigious hotels they stay, it's in the summer, they have 10,000 people. Now we organize WAVES, which is World Association of Vedic Studies. After many reminders, sending money, sending tickets, this, that, we get 100, 150 people. We organized for 25 years, we've organized the Vedanta Congress for academic, 25 years, I'm funding it, organizing it for a long time. 150 people, maybe 200 people show up. There are no shortage of people who start one more organization to become somebody, become important. And then they'll create a small little number of people saying the same old thing, regurgitating, they've said it 50 times, they've heard it here and there, copy paste, say it again. But nothing goes beyond it. So gup shup, it's gup shup. But beyond the gup shup, where are we? Where are the leaders? That is the thing. We need to create that thinking now. Otherwise, it won't happen. Even change in government, which I want, I want that, I'm supporting. But what can one man do? You need a whole army of thinkers, leaders, there's department after department with corrupt after corrupt guy. Where will you get such a huge number of governance people, experts in, okay, you want to change HRD. HRD is not just one man either. HRD, all this thinking has gone down, from kindergarten to schools, universities, this place, that place. It's all like that. I was invited to give a closed door session with Foreign Service Institute. Foreign Service are people where when they train the Indian Foreign Service, when they hire people who are going to become diplomats, ambassadors, people like that. So there is a batch of 30 people every year, the cream. So I gave them a talk, very disappointed, because I wanted to ask them that when a Japanese diplomat tells you about Japan history, he tells you about its greatness, its contribution. China will tell you about Chinese scientific contributions and this and that. You meet a Russian, he's very proud what it means to be Russian, don't mix him with somebody else. French, knows he's French, he's not German or English, he's French, he's not either mixed up. Yeah? Do you guys have a clear sense of who you are, what is your history, what is your distinctiveness? I was trying to inspire them. I would say 1/3 were on my side. 1/3 were neutral, confused, quiet. 1/3 were very opposed. They were asking questions like, the problems are talking breaking India? They are the breaking India type. They were asking questions like, what do you mean the India story, Northeast as a separate story? If I'm a Dalit, why should I think about India? I have my own problem as a Dalit. If I'm a Muslim, why should I, what do you mean greatness of India? What did it have to do with my ancestors? This is our people who are going to be our ambassadors, who are going to represent us. It's like a corporate guy finding out that his own salesmen don't believe in their product. Why are they salesmen? What are they going to do? So I said, I'm very sorry, because when you grow and maybe you are in this idealistic Indian intellectual, idealistic pseudo-intellectual mode where too much self-criticism is considered fashionable, but when you go out, you will find that diplomats of other countries are not like that towards their country. They are very patriotic. You may think it is out of fashion and it is a sign of being fascist and nationalistic and chauvinistic, and they use words like sir, but isn't that going to be jingoistic? I said no diplomat thinks that praising his country is considered jingoism. That jargon is Indian leftist jargon, which disease does not exist anywhere else. This is Indian guys, sir. I had another closed door discussion with people who are supposedly very senior, connected with national security. Closed door. Nobody allowed, camera, shamra, no this, that. Some are retired, some are not, some are, but they are well placed. Similar conversation. 1/3, very solidly, the guy who chairing it saying, I agree with everything you said. They were sitting on one side of this long thing. The other side, those guys completely opposed to what I'm saying. Completely opposed. So India is polarized. India's future, is India a nation? Should India remain a nation? Should it be broken up? Is it a can of worms? Is it a terrible thing that is called India that has been put together artificially by the British, and we should get rid of it? That very debate also, you will find a lot of people on both sides. This matter is getting quite worse, quite bad. And you will find this problem with media people, intellectual people, Indian Foreign Service people. My own friends I grew up with long ago, I'm now 63, but when I was like a teenager, people I used to play with, they are in all these important positions. They are like this. They are saying, Rajiv, why are you fighting? Why you done well? You should go enjoy, get a beach house, go. Why are you worrying? Why should I worry? Why nobody worries? Nobody worries. Why are you worrying? And so if we go, if it happens, it happens. Who cares? This is the attitude of the who's who of Delhi. Delhi is a pretty anti-nationalistic place. India is a hub of this. So I'm being very honest because I tell you, I go India 4 times a year. So you can't say I'm sitting here, I don't have a good connection. I'm more connected with India. I travel north, south, east, west. I go by trains, I go by buses. I live in villages. I do all of that. I'm more Indian, more connected with the soil than most people in India. And I'm telling you these things.